So this is the introduction to the tarot, and you see my opening screen. I hope everyone can see it. And we're going to do a little background. A brief history. Oh, great. Okay, a little brief history on the cards, why they were created, who created them, and what information is on the cards. So a little brief history is there are 78 cards in the full set of the tarot. Our regular playing deck, because as I think everyone here may know, that all of the cards that we use to gamble with and play pinochle and all sorts of things are the tarot cards. So our regular playing deck of cards is 52, plus the 22 trumps and the 4 pages. In the old days they had pages. The 22 cards we will study are called the major arcana, or trumps, and relate to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Why were they created? Well, there was a small problem in the 4th century AD. The Library of Alexandria was burned to the ground. It contained about 700,000 scrolls, and that was something of a crisis because not only did it contain most of the treasures of information up to that date on the earth, also men and women were permitted to study there. So this loss of information was something of a crisis in those days. So who created these cards? Well, there were the members of the literary and scientific communities gathered together, and they were all from different parts of the world, so most of them didn't speak the same language, and they got together to find out a solution to placing the wisdom teachings in a vehicle that could not be destroyed, or at least could be carried about. So they got together to create a solution to this crisis of loss of information to the general public. So what information was on the cards? And the picture book that was created contains the ancient wisdom teachings which were taught in the secret schools of India, Tibet, and China, and had traveled to Egypt. Because they spoke so many languages, a picture book was decided upon. And in order for people to carry this book around, people being the initiates who understood the symbols on these cards, they decided to disguise it as a game. This allowed the initiates to travel safely with it, and if somebody questioned them about what are you carrying, what is that weirdo stuff that's in your pocket, they could just say, oh, it's a game, here, let me do your fortune, let me tell your fortune for you, let's play cards with them. So this ended up allowing the distribution to a great extent of the ancient wisdom teachings to travel throughout the world. The mysteries in plain sight was a brilliant idea. So what is the main information, the main topic? It's the secret doctrine. Hidden in the cards is that God and the self are one. Freedom is seeing with the eyes of the self, and you must live in your heart. That's the essence of what's in the cards. Here is a picture of the Library of Alexandria as it stands today. You can see it was completely recreated, but you can see it was based on the old construction, that it held innumerable rolls and scrolls of information. And the pictures on the left, you can see you've got a few pictures in this library that look familiar. They look like the cards, no less. So why use the Kabbalah? It's interesting that they came up with a picture book and then they hung it on the skeleton of the Kabbalah. So there is a story that relates to the Kabbalah, and there were 4 attempts by God to help mankind return to paradise and have once again a direct experience of God. The first attempt was, and this is a story, so you have to go with that, that God gave the Kabbalah to the angels before the world was created. Then, when Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, an angel came up and handed them the Kabbalah and said, "This will help you find your way back." Of course, they promptly lost it. So 3, God gave it to Abraham, still hoping, as part of his covenant with him. And then man promptly forgot about it. So then, once again, God gave it to Moses on his second trip up the mountain. On the first trip, Moses received the 10 Commandments, the exoteric commandments, the exoteric law. The esoteric law is contained in the Kabbalah, and it was given to Moses, who gave it to the priests, who promptly hid it among themselves. So later, as the story goes, the Kabbalah was finally written down in medieval times. And you may find copies of the Tarot somewhere around, a few copies in the 12th century, and most of them starting to come out in the 14th century. There are 3 different ways that you may see the word Kabbalah spelled. I have it here. The Hebrew tradition is with a K. The Christian 15th century Renaissance tradition, which was interested in the Hermetic, aka Egyptian, and Greek thought, spelled it with a C. I will use the C because basically it's fewer letters and it's easier to remember. It is also spelled with a Q, and the mystical Western tradition of the Rosicrucians, the Knights Templar, the Freemasons, and the Alchemists. Also, Hebrew letters are also numbers and words. This makes an allowance for a great deal of information to be put on the cards by just placing a letter down, or a number, because you know the numbers relate to words and they relate to letters. So it causes a great deal of cross-referencing that once you get used to them, you understand even more. There are different depths to this use of Hebrew letters. Also, it runs along the same lines that Greek and Latin were used for the scientific community, so that it didn't matter what language you spoke, you would be able to follow along. So this allowed more information, and each letter was also a word or a concept. So moving along, here is the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. This may be familiar to many of you. I was able to find a picture of one that had all the symbols of the various planets on it too, which is kind of cool. The Tree of Life is in 3 columns. The feminine column is on the left. Interesting enough, it starts at the top, the number 3, and that sphere is called understanding. The next one down is severity. You've got to watch out for women. Yes, severity is there. And the next one down is splendor. On the right side, you have the masculine side, which starts with wisdom in the gray sphere, number 2, goes down to number 4, mercy, and 7, victory. In the center column are 4 spheres, and they are the crown at the top, and beauty in the center, which is also the solar plexus, and foundation, and at the bottom the kingdom, which is where we all reside in Earth. So there are 32 paths of wisdom on the Tree of Life. These are all taken advantage of in the cards. The Tree of Life is like a complex filing system. This may be why I'm so tuned into it, because I'm a bookkeeper. It became very easy to me to be able to separate out different ideas and thoughts and concepts and place them in little filing cabinets, and then go into each cabinet and do a little research and discovery. The 10 emanations that you see, or aspects of God, are noted here. Each one relates to a planet. The numbers 1 to 10 are assigned to the spheres and represent the macrocosm. The numbers 11 to 32 are assigned the tarot cards and represent the microcosm. What's great about this picture is you can actually see the cards placed on the paths between the different macrocosm aspects. The word intelligence, and this is something we'll have to study at another time, but each path has what's called an intelligence. And the term, and that's an aspect or a meaning for that path. The word intelligence used for each path, though, literally denotes insight or awareness rather than intellect. And just to continue this overview, the white, gray, and black spheres, number 1, number 2, and number 3, are in the 3 supernulls. The colors of the spectrum are assigned to the 7 lower centers. So this is a brief overview of this wonderful tree of life, and we will move on to the Kabbalah, means received wisdom. So the colors and symbols. The tarot is a book written in symbols. In fact, our communication with those that we work with once we get used to working with the self is through symbology. We think in symbols. This is universal. A 0 would mean God in most 99% countries. So the tarot book is written in symbols. The symbols for the planets and for the zodiac are used to convey concepts. The 7 yoga chakras and the energy centers they represent in the body are the same as the 7 planets in the ancient Western tradition. In the ancient Western tradition, I'm going to this is moving around a lot, so I'm okay. That's all right. So in the Western tradition, we use terms alchemical metals for the chakra centers. This caused a great deal of problems in the Middle Ages because people were trying to raise lead into gold. But it had nothing to do with lead and nothing to do with gold. It has to do with your chakras, which I think most of you have heard of by now. It's just pretty universal. And they have to do with your body. Everything has to do with your body in the tarot. In astrology, every sign of the zodiac represents a part of the human body. So the signs of the zodiacs would represent hands, arms, legs, your intestines, your head, your left foot, etc., that sort of thing. Numbers, letters, lines, circles, triangles, and squares are all employed as symbols to convey ideas. All of this is to convey ideas. Also, very important, colors have specific meanings. And if you ever decide to color a deck of cards, then you would like to use the colors that are taught to be used on specific areas of the card. This is primary. You cannot go wacko and just color them willy-nilly anything you want. There is a reason for every color, and it affects your subconscious mind in such a way as to start triggering awareness within you as to who you really are. So let's see if I can... colors. There are the planets and the zodiac. In ancient times, we didn't know about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, we being people. The ancients knew about them, but because people didn't know about them, they didn't deal with them in the ancient mystery teachings. So let's understand a little bit about the planets, the 7 planets, that correspond to the 7 chakras or energy centers in the body. So I talked about symbols. So the symbols we're going to talk about now, we'll just deal with 3 of them, are the circle, the creator, the crescent or moon, which is symbolizing a cup, and therefore receptivity and reflecting, and of course the grail, that great wonderful symbol of receptivity. The cross is also a very simple symbol, which you will see used on almost most of these 7 symbols. And it represents the X, horizontal, which is the material, and vertical, which is the spiritual. So the cross is the spiritual raising up the material. It also, the cross, refers to the 4 elements: fire, air, earth, and water. Now, one of the interesting things is that symbol, we'll just go into Mercury. The symbol of superconsciousness, other than just the symbol of 0 for the creator, the symbol of superconsciousness in the Western tradition is Mercury. You will find it at the top of the crown. Well, it's a symbol for superconsciousness. It represents both male and female. The feminine is represented by the crescent, receptivity, and it also is represented by the subconscious mind. So you have the crescent, the cup. If you turn it on its side, it becomes receptive and the feminine. And then you have the masculine is represented by the cross, or self-consciousness. So what does that have to do with Mercury? You look at the symbol and you see the cross at the bottom. You see the 4 elements, the earth at the bottom, being raised up through the circle, the creator, and expressed through the crescent in a receptive mode, the feminine. So this speaks a lot about the human nature and the ideal of becoming super conscious or super aware. How did the feminine, the crescent, get on the top? Why isn't the circle on the top? That's the creator. Wouldn't the symbol for superconsciousness have the circle on the top? No, because you don't get there unless you purify the crescent, the feminine, the subconscious mind. So the raised up, the elevated subconscious mind is the symbol of superconsciousness. Okay, this can cause a lot of problems for people because they're going, oh, we've been taught to We've been taught to take the feminine, and this is in many of our books, our religious books, to separate out the feminine, the wife, the daughter, the women, and put them in a separate room, and all the men can go in and be made priests, and the male aspect can be made, the men can lead the community, and the women all get second place. But the reality is, and this is the problem, is that the tarot and the wisdom teachings have nothing to do with your neighbor or your brother or your sister or your mother or your children. They only have to do with you and your consciousness. So when you get married and you look at your wife, if you're a man, and the woman looks at her husband, there's a dynamic that's going on there. But the wisdom teachings are not talking about that dynamic. They're talking about the male and female, that you are alone. And to raise up the feminine subconsciousness in your mind. Not putting your wife in the back room. So get clear on this. We're not talking about other people when we discuss the tarot. And we've discussed these symbols. So what are those ramifications? You can definitely see where some of the religions have fallen flat on their faces because instead of exalting the feminine, they've put it in second place. So there's a ways to go on this planet for dealing with this. How do you raise up the subconscious mind? The tarot will teach you how to do that. But first you have to understand how it works. And that's the law of the Trinity, the law of the triangle, the law, period. The subconscious mind is the creator of everything you think and say and do. It's the reflecting, receptive part of your creation, of your mind, of your consciousness. So it will replicate anything you ask of it. Now this is manifest in the human body. The female creates the baby. The male has to be part of it. You get the two together and the baby comes out through the female. This seems all very simple, but now you've got to take it to a higher level, to the mind, to consciousness. So this could be a really clear position of why you are where you are, because you've put yourself there, and you have no one else to blame or to thank than yourself, your inner self. You are exactly where you want to be because you have directed your subconscious mind to get out there and gather to you everything you think about and want and say. This is why I tell my students that if you say something negative, be prepared to duck because it's coming around and will hit you in the back of the head. This is very important. This is a very important concept. This is how we raise ourselves up, and this is why the symbol of Mercury is the symbol of superconsciousness. You have to do this within yourself. You are in the earth, and you, the directing principle, the cross, has to raise up your subconscious mind through everything you think. There are two cards in the tarot deck that hold a sword. They are both feminine characters. You have to learn to use the sword of discrimination in your mind as to what you will think about, what you will do. So, with that in mind, and you also, there's also the idea of how much energy or passion you put to what you think about. I always think that when we're watching television and all that information is coming into our minds, remember, your subconscious mind records it all, doesn't know there's a difference between real and unreal, unless your conscious mind is real specific, and then it will multiply that, all that stuff you watch on TV, in your life. Have fun. That's a good one. So let's move on to colors. Colors are extremely important because they represent all sorts of information on the cards, where they're placed, etc. So we're going to go through this very briefly. You have this as a handout, I believe, that you'll get, so it can help you understand how colors work. I also find it interesting. The first color is red and indicates action, courage, strength, and physical energy. Now, one of the things about the colors, the mystical colors, is they are somewhat the opposite or the reflection of the earth. So what did mankind do? He used red as a stop sign. I always get a kick out of that. It took me a while to not walk on red. When I was in the order, I actually did that. I was in for a year inside the house in San Francisco in the Holy Order of Mans for 1 year. I was sewing robes or whatever. And there was a lecture over, this was one address, and there was a lecture at another address. And I had to walk there with a sister, and I had to cross several streets. I'm in San Francisco, so there's heavy traffic. and the light turned red and I walked. Not a good idea. Both she and I got hit by a car. There were no permanent damage, but that was a real wake-up call as to I had immersed myself in the colors and then almost got myself killed. So they're a little opposite to what we think of these colors. So you don't have to memorize anything, just keep the color chart to help you when you're looking at the cards. So red indicates action, courage, strength, physical energy. It represents the element fire. It's the nature of the planet Mars. It's alchemical sulfur. So once again, we always use the word alchemical when we mean a chakra. So in the Hindu, it is Rajas Guna. It's the conscious plane of mental activity. It corresponds to this, and please forgive me if my Sanskrit pronunciation is terrible. We'll just have to hang in there. The Svadhisthana, which is the abode of the self, chakra, which is a nerve center between the base of the spine and the navel. Orange, this is red plus yellow. It indicates positive energy and vitality and authority. So orange isn't too bad. I just had my nails done in orange. Let's see if you can see them. I was getting a kick out of bright colors. It symbolizes the sun with some Mercury influence. Now we know a whole lot about Mercury. It stands for a chemical gold and corresponds to the Anahata chakra, or the cardiac plexus. Yellow indicates mental equilibrium and intellect. I always laugh. I see someone paint their house bright yellow, and I go, oh, they're attracted to the intellect. That's very interesting. Yes, what colors you surround yourself with do indicate where you're at. It represents the element air and light, and it is the alchemical Mercury, in Hindu, the Sattva Guna, and the superconscious plane of mental activity. Green, I love green. This is blue and yellow combined. It is indicative of growth, increase, emotion, desire. It represents the harmony of nature and the planet Venus. It is the alchemical copper, the Vishuddhi, chakra, a nerve center located in the throat. Okay, green is cool. I painted our bedroom green. Green is the color of love. Unbeknownst to all those Valentine cards that go out on Valentine's Day where they've got red everywhere, well, that's a little bit on the passion side. Green is the color of love. I try to explain that to people. That's why I first said I love the color green. It is the harmony of nature and the planet Venus. How many times have you walked out in the woods and gone for a hike or just been out in nature? Why do they create little green parks in big cities? To commune with nature and commune with God at that level, at the level of love, nurturing. The card that stands for love and nature and duplication is the Empress card in the deck, and everything on it is green. Then we're on to blue. Here we have represented water, memory, receptivity and reflection. The planets are the moon and Jupiter. It represents alchemical silver. It's the Ajna chakra at the center of the brain, behind the nose, called the pituitary gland. It represents the subconscious plane of mental activity. In the tarot deck, the third card 3 is the High Priestess, and there's a whole lot of blue on that card. And it's the virgin feminine form, and there is a sort of like a waterfall that comes off her costume, and it flows, and I call it the stream of consciousness that flows throughout the cards from the scroll that she's holding in her lap. So the blue represents water and memory. And remember again, the subconscious mind remembers everything like a little recording device. Things you really like to forget just will pop up unless you use your conscious mind to clean house. If you have a lot of stuff in your house, all those memories and stuff, and you want to move on, it's a little hard. It's a little difficult. You go into a Zen monastery, it's very bare and simple. Something to keep in mind, all taught in the tarot. So now we're on to indigo, blue-violet. The color indicates the first matter. That's like pre-anything, before manifestation. It symbolizes the akasha, the Sanskrit word meaning an etheric field in which past events are imprinted. Corresponding alchemical metal is lead. This is the traditional color of Saturn. Saturn can be pretty harsh. It represents the chakra Muladhara, identified with the sacral plexus at the base of the spine, the Kundalini source that moves up the spine and you want to keep under control so you don't blow out your brains. Yes, there are people that inhabit many asylums that have gone too far with certain parts of their chakras out of balance. So this is a very powerful spot in the human body and needs to be nurtured and watched over so that it rises only when you're ready to use it. Violet. The planet associated with violet is Jupiter. It's an indicator of spiritual power and truth. We're going to see a lot of violet on the next card, the full card. It's the highest visible color vibration, and it's the Manipura chakra or solar plexus. Represents alchemical tin. Silver represents lunar currents and the moon. You'll see a lot of silver on the High Priestess card. Gold, the color represents solar forces. White represents purity, primal light, pure spirit. So whenever you see white. Black is used to represent primal matter, the occult unknown, and, interesting, the element earth. Brown represents earthly nature. That's easy. Gray is a combination of black and white. Union of opposites, and therefore wisdom. Moving on. The yoga tradition and the tarot. So there you see how the yogis have put colors on the 7 chakras. This is just for your reference. It lets you know that the traditions of the East and the West are pretty much the same. And therefore, anybody who's got travel plans to go to India for the reason of discovering the ancient wisdom teachings can hang out here with us, and we can cover the same topics with the same clarity and use, and teach you meditation and other things that can be very helpful that have been taught for a long time in the East. So let's get on to the characters. Again, you get to hear about the 3 characters in the book, which are states of consciousness. They are represented by all these different pictures. And so, again, we're just repeating. The superconsciousness is represented by a circle and Mercury. Self-consciousness is represented by a cross and the term alchemical sulfur. Subconsciousness is the feminine aspect is always represented by a crescent and alchemical salt. So sometimes you'll hear mercury, sulfur, and salt, those 3. And that's what is being talked about. The law of the triangle and how it works. This is interesting. The triangle is the perfect figure, implying completion. Spirit in 3 modes of expression: will, wisdom, and activity. In Egypt, the Holy Family was Osiris, Isis, and Horus. In Hindu, the family is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. In Christianity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So I'm going to move on. We're not going to get into too much more detail on that. We're going to talk about the Fool, an actual card. Yay, I know you've come to hear about cards. So, again, the Fool is superconsciousness, representing superconsciousness, our inner self about to engage in another adventure. Because, yes, we love adventures. The innermost self has nothing to do with time and place or with name and form. And we will talk about the symbols and colors on the card. There is the Fool card. This card is filled with information. And having quickly, completely memorized all the information I've covered so far, you can each have some understanding of it. But I will help you with this. The Fool card does have a lot of information. So applying what we've just covered, I will explain to you what you're looking at. Behind the Fool, and I say him, but it's he, she, it, behind the character, the spiritual sun is white. So the placement behind the character means that's supporting or a foundation. So not necessarily below, but it could be. But this is what is backing up the character. You know, so what the character falls back on is behind the character. So we have the sun is white, and so it's pure. Surrounded by yellow, and yellow is the air and represents air and light, alchemical mercury. We know about mercury, superconsciousness. And air relates to breathing and breath. The shoes are yellow too, same consciousness. So he's walking on the yellow. The white rose is purified action, because normally you'll see the roses in red. There are only 2 white roses in the whole deck, and they represent purified passion from red to white. The character is within a white egg of light, purity, primal light, pure spirit. So I think you're getting the theme here. The white dog, cute little dog, always reminds me of a little dog that I know, called Johnny Rocket, whenever I see him. But this white dog is the intellect, purified and obedient to the self at a personal level. The real master is the self, not the ego, which puts the intellect first. So if you find people going off on little intellectual, philosophical runouts of mind, you know what's going first. You can just think about that. The Violet Mountains, a spiritual power and truth, highest visible color vibration, we covered violet, solar plexus. So these again are behind him, supporting him, where he is standing, way up there at the top of these mountains. Brown is the cliff, so that's the earthly nature, just standing on that. He's going to have his adventure in the earthly nature. The red feather on his hat. This is desire raised to the highest level and symbolizes the king of the air, the eagle, and the Egyptian feather of truth is Maat, M-A-A-T. So you can remember there was a group of guys from all over who put this deck of cards together. So your symbology is going to be universal. The garments are white, red, and black. 3 qualities of the Hindu philosophy, the 3 gunas. White is sattva, light and consciousness. Red lining is rajas, desire and passion. So, and black, the black garment is tamas, T-A-M-A-S, which is inertia, typical of the physical world. So he's got the red lining on his jacket, which means he's got enough energy to move along, to get going. He has passion, but he needs to have all three, the red, the white, and the black, on his cloak. The whole tree of life decorates the fool's outer robe. It is, and remember, okay, now let's get into something a little more interesting, which is that you put a garment on to protect yourself. When you go out in the rain, you go get your raincoat, toss it on, and out you go into the rain. It protects you, so that's the garment's doing. So the garment being for protection, you've got the tree of life, the sun, the moon, and the triple flame of consciousness down there. Let's see, right there. And so therefore it says we have the protection of the cosmos as we go on our journey. Let's go across the bottom. The 0 here is the cosmic egg, or undeveloped potential. The term the fool comes from the Latin word follies, meaning bag of wind, or bellows, air, spirit. Once again, we're back to the air, which also means spirit. We move over here to the right, and we have the Hebrew letter, Aleph, and that means ox. And there, right above the letter, is a little picture of an ox's head. And to the right of the word of the Hebrew letter Aleph is an A. So we have it in English, an A. And that tells us that Aleph means ox. And A also, Aleph in the Hebrew alphabet means 1. So there's two things going on here. The card is letter 0, but Aleph is number 1. So they each have their own numbering system. It could be confusing to some, or you could just try not to be confused and go with it. So every Hebrew letter has a number. They get up to, they eventually will be 100, 200, 300, just like the Roman numerals. So in this case, we have A, it's number 1. The element is air. Once again, it's the breath, the divine breath. And it also means that every time you take a breath, every time you breathe, you are breathing spirit. So just keep that in mind. You take a deep breath, and it calms you down. When I've taken yoga classes, and the point is to get each breath with each movement. This can get a little hairy when the movements speed up, but at the beginning, when they're slower, you inhale, you stand up. You exhale, you fold over. You inhale, you go into another position. You exhale. You get to the point where all you can do is breathe and think about inhaling and exhaling. The yogis really had this down pat about the breath. But it has to do with getting in touch with your spiritual inner self, not doing the poses. To continue, let's look at some more symbols. We have the wallet and the wand up here, and the wallet and wand form a sexual symbol. The wallet is feminine and the wand masculine. The wand is a symbol of the will. Black wands suggest occult power. The wallet carries all of the fool's prior adventures. Let's see, the lock on the wallet is the all-seeing eye. It creates the future, and you need the spiritual sight to open it. And again, we see the eagle on the wallet. So we have the white undergarment has written the Tetragrammaton, the Kabbalistic name of names for God. It stands for reality. Another that is God underneath this garment, which is like the self underneath the garment of our vehicle. The belt is the zodiac, which represents time. The fool can't fall off the cliff because he's actually going around in a circle. As far as the self is concerned, you never go anywhere. There isn't anywhere to go in the now. Also, the sun at the top is a symbol of the Christ and the Tao. There's a quote, "The fool of God is the only one who can hear the Tao." I think I've covered most of my notes on this. That's enough for just one card to get you an idea of you are the fool. This is you. You're taking your journey, and the journey is all the other cards. There is no more responsibility. There's no responsibility in the Fool card, and all the other cards are just packed with responsibility. So now we're going to go to the Tarot Tableau. We just have a minute or two. And the first line, this is just a review, just to give you an idea of what we can do in the future. The principles are the first line. The agencies are the second line. And the results are the third line. So this being the case, look at the cards. This is one of many ways to arrange the cards. This is usually principally the way you would want to do it when you first study the cards. You want to study the cards in order to begin with before you get crazy and put them in all sorts of different orders. Just looking at the first column, you've got the principle of the Magician. You have the agency of strength, and you have the result, the third line, of the adversary, or others call him the devil. Of course, in the adversary, when you see that little white beard, you know it's God. I won't go into any further information on the Tarot Tableau. This is just to wet your whistle. So, awakening your inner self. Study the cards. Each card is a foundation for the one that follows, so begin with the Fool. Place a card in front of you and just look at it for 10 minutes each day of the week. The next week, do the next card. Write down thoughts that come to you. The tarot works on the subconscious mind. Yes, you have a way to get her out of this mess that you may have made of your life. You can work on your subconscious mind using the tarot to get you home. This will create new patterns in your life. So, future webinars would be on specific cards, the Tree of Life, and the Cupid's face, which is really important to get to know about.
Great,
and
thank you, Margot.
I will leave it at that.
And Margot, would you mind taking a couple of questions?
Oh, not at all.
So if anyone has a question, just raise your hand there and I'll unmute you. And while we're waiting, if people have questions, are there certain decks that you recommend for study?
The deck that I use, is sold by the Science of Man, M-A-N, on their website. It's the Holy Order of Man's deck of cards that's been used the last 40 years. It is a non-colored deck. It will come with coloring instructions, and they carry it on their website. They also carry 2 books that relate to this deck called The Jewels of the Wise and The Keystone of Tarot Symbols. And those three items would be a great starter for anyone studying the tarot, and then having a copy of this Tarot Tableau so you can see the colors is helpful, and you should have a copy of that as a handout. So Holy Order, scienceofman.org, and go to their website, and you can probably order the decks from them.
Great, thanks. Does anyone have any comments? Okay, Marianne.
Woohoo! Thank you, Margot.
Oh, you're welcome.
This is just awesome. I've been kind of in another world here. What I'm really fascinated by, I just have to share a memory that kept flashing. When I went to meet my teacher, it was Chuck. I had never met him, and you know, he always asked people to bring a rock for his garden, and I took a piece of fool's gold,
Cool.
And yeah, it really, and I mean what happened to me after that was just remarkable. So I really love the Fool card. What I really love is the idea that all of this is already working. These are symbols that are just tangible. So I can actually look at a card and do the work without being in anybody else's presence.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
That's great.
Yeah. And you can, you know, when I first did this is I would take a card and just carry it around with me. And if I was at, you know, my purse, and then if I was at work, I would just kind of put it up on my computer or kind of look at it. And what you want to do is have it impress your subconscious mind.
Okay.
Because remember what I said, the subconscious mind does not distinguish between what's real or unreal. It just absorbs. It just absorbs and then replicates. It will replicate the event in the card in your life.
Great. It looks like, Anne, did you have a comment? It says the deck you showed are colored differently than the deck I have. Did you color those yourself? Is a question that Anne has.
Yes, I used the directions of Mother Ruth Blyton, who wrote these two books about the Keystone and the Jewels of the Wise. And then I had, I directed someone to color the cards on her computer based on that. And then I reviewed what she did. So, yeah.
Awesome. Cynthia. I unmuted you. We should be able to hear you. Uh-oh. We can't hear you if you're talking. Okay, I'm actually right now, I just unmuted everybody, so if someone else has something to say, they could just pop up, since we just have a couple minutes.
Did you actually sit with Mother Ruth?
Actually, yes. I spent some time with her in the 1970s. She had me for about 6 months, and she was doing meditations in, I think it was, and she was changing the cards, and I helped her draw the cards. Not the originals, just modifications.
Nice.
With her. I actually made a deck as she and I would work on them, and I still have it to this day, of black and whites of her teaching deck that I modified, and then I took a small deck and modified it identically to that deck. So it was just this little, you know, task on my own part for my own edification, and I've kept it during that time. And I spent time with her, but on the other hand, I had never had a class with her on the tarot. She did, I do have all her notes, though. I have all her classes that she had typed up, and I have a binder of her classes that was given to me when I was a member of the Science of Man. Reverend Mary Anderson had this binder of her classes and gave it to me, gave me a copy of it, which is about 1 inch thick.
What a sacred thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was very, very illuminating, and we appreciate your time, and everyone that's come. We really appreciate you being here and participating in this, and we will have more further tarot classes, right, Margot?
Yes, we will. Of course, you spent a great deal of time in this class on background, the colors, the symbols, that sort of thing. We will be diving into the cards, and in order, next the Magician and the High Priestess, maybe do 3 cards a class. That's kind of pushing it, but it gets them going, and I would like to do it, you know, in the future. And then also, you know, minor aside discussions on the how the agencies, it works between the columns of the tarot tableau, and how that works. So you can change things in your life. If you do a certain thing, what is the result going to be? And using the cards to do that. So that's another way of looking at them. And then, of course, the cube of space which I find really fascinating and quite interesting. And it is completely founded on what's called the Book of Formation, which is thousands of years old.
Mm.
And that's fun. It tells you how to get off the planet Earth very directly. But you get to take your body with you. Yes, you can't leave it behind. Sorry, guys. We live in heaven. It's here. And we got to work with what we've got.
That's great. Well, thank you all, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Margot.
I appreciate your support.
Yeah, it's wonderful. See you again soon.
Okay, bye.
Yes.